Hello, once again, I'm going to talk you through the module self-assessment rubric, and this is the module self-assessment rubric for module 3. All right, so this is what the Word document looks like, the one that you will complete and fill in and then save and upload as part of your portfolio. So there are 7 potential criteria here this week. Prior to the procedure, did you appropriately greet the client and explain the purpose? You should do that regardless of regardless which which role play. Hello, I'm just going to quickly explain the Module 3 self-assessment rubric. There are 7 criteria here. Some of these criteria are relevant no matter what role play you choose to do. Some of the criteria are more relevant for specific role plays. All right. So in either case, no matter which role play you choose, you will want to make sure that you appropriately greet the client and explain the purpose before you do whatever the procedure is. Um, if the client is conscious, you'll want to make sure the client is on board prior to and during the procedure. Even if the client is unconscious, you might say things like, "Is it all right?" and then just go on and do it. But you wouldn't wait to see, wait for them to answer because they're unconscious. Um, Regardless of whether the client is conscious or not, during the procedure, you're going to explain what's going on and what you're doing. All right. And if the client is conscious, you might have to give them some directions, ask them to do something in a way that sounds polite and kind and patient. All right. Depending on what procedure you are doing, you might have to refer to some embarrassing body parts or functions. And if you do that, you should be able to do so in a very matter-of-fact manner. But you may not need to meet this criteria if if the role play that you choose doesn't deal with uh, private body parts. All right. Regardless of whether the client is unconscious or conscious, you'll need to be able to engage in kind of natural conversation, um, about things like the weather or what's going on that day or, an upcoming occasion, but something that just makes the client feel part of what's happening and feel more at ease. And then you'll need to take leave of the client, regardless of whether they are conscious or unconscious. All right, let me go to the Moodle. This is the Moodle page that includes the rubric and the details. And of course, the details are also in that fillable rubric at the bottom. All right, so let's talk through some of how you might do these things. All right, so you need to alert the client to your presence. You might use this especially if the person's unconscious and their eyes are closed. You might say, "Hey, it's Jen here. How are you doing? Good morning, Galina. Hey, Joe, how's it going? Hi, Mrs. Choi. How are you doing? Hi, Kim. How's your day going?" Something like that. Then you'll say why you're there, what the purpose is. I'm here to clean you up, or I'm here, it's just about time for your bed bath, or I'm going to take your temperature now. All right, and you might give a longer explanation if the procedure is a longer procedure. All right, if the client is conscious, you'll need to make sure the client is on board prior to and during the procedure. And that includes asking questions like, "Is that all right? Are you okay with that? How does that sound?" after you state something. Or just even beginning, like, "Is this a good time for your bed bath now?" Or, "Are you okay if I take your pulse now?" And then you'll need to continue checking in with the client. Is that okay? Is that all right? Or even just, "Now we're going to turn you over." If you end with a rising intonation, that sounds like a question. All right. Or even checking in and saying, "Are you all right? Are you doing okay?" Or even when you ask, you give suggestions and options, and that gets the person have to respond to you. that gets them on board. It shows that they are on board or in agreement with and willing to cooperate with the procedure. During the procedure, did you explain what's going on and what you are doing? So while you're drawing the curtains across, you might say, okay, so let's make it more private in here. Now all right, it might tickle a bit. So giving heads up about things that might hurt or tickle or feel uncomfortable, or they can be cold. But explaining what's going on, what you're doing. All right. Then, if the client is conscious, you might need to ask them to do something, but you want to do so. You don't want to say, "Do this," turn over, sit up, roll over. You don't want to have that intonation, and you don't want to just use the imperative. You want to use um, polite ways to ask people to do things. So, could I get you to roll over? Could you roll over for me? Can you roll over? Here's a washcloth if you'd like to wash your face, and then making sure that you're not rushing them. We've got lots of time, there's no rush. And then depending on what your role play is, if you are talking about body parts or functions that are private or embarrassing, you need to speak in a matter-of-fact manner and use appropriate terminology and not get all red and worked up or have a funny smile. So you need to be able to control your nonverbal reactions to the topic. The more you practice this, the easier it gets. All right. And then even if the client is unconscious, you will want to engage in natural conversation about the client. And here are some ideas. You might talk about the weather, a special holiday that's coming up, someone that's coming to visit, maybe a picture that's on the dresser, or an item of clothing, or maybe a scarf that you see that's beautiful, or maybe if there's a loud noise in the environment or something happening, talk about those things. So that's important regardless of whether the client is conscious or unconscious. If the client is unconscious, you might want to be talking with a family member and include the client in that conversation. Don't say things about unconscious clients that you wouldn't say in front of a conscious client. And in front of a conscious client as well, you don't want to talk about them in front of them. Okay, and then last here, did you leave appropriately? You shouldn't just sneak out. You need to say goodbye. So we hint that we're leaving before we leave. All right, I think that's everything. Is there anything else you need? Okay, well, I'll be back in a little later to check on you. See you in a few minutes. Something like that. All right. So go ahead and practice the role plays for this module and try to put all of these things into practice. Good luck.